For two crucial periods in modern history, Winston Churchill was First Lord of the Admiralty. It is dubbed
The 60th anniversary of Winston Churchill's death on January 24, 2025, invites renewed attention to his legacy, which remains both celebrated and controversial. While Churchill is widely regarded as a hero for his leadership during World War II, his role in shaping post-war global policies and his views on imperialism and race ignited ongoing debates. These debates, often laden with conspiracy theories, underscore the complex and multifaceted nature of his legacy. Here we arrange the list of the key controversies around Churchill's legacy. The Yalta Conference in February 1945 was a big meeting at the final stages of World War II, where Churchill, Roosevelt and Stalin decided what to do with the world once the war was over. They made plans about who would control which parts of Europe, especially Eastern Europe. Now, here's the debatable part. Some people believe that Churchill purposely gave away Eastern Europe to Stalin, including countries like Poland, knowing they'd fall under Soviet control. They say this was a betrayal because Churchill and others had promised freedom and independence to those countries. They say that Churchill didn't fight hard enough to stop Stalin, breaking promises to allies and leaving those countries under Soviet rule for decades. But it's disputed, as others argue that Churchill had no real choice because Stalin's army was already in Eastern Europe, so Churchill and Roosevelt had to compromise to keep peace.
Leaders of all time, Marshal of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin.
Percentages Agreement. The Percentages Agreement was a secret deal between Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin in 1944, where they decided how much influence each country would have over certain parts of Eastern Europe after the war. For example, Churchill suggested that Britain would have more control in Greece, while the Soviet Union would dominate Romania and Bulgaria. They wrote these percentages down on a piece of paper. Some people think this was practical because it helped avoid fighting over these areas, but others believe it was unfair because it ignored what the people in those countries might have wanted, focusing only on the big powers' interests. Winston Churchill was known for his powerful speeches during World War II. He told people to stay brave and fight back against Nazi Germany. After the war, he wrote books and gave more speeches about what happened. Some people think Churchill focused mostly on the good things he did and made himself look like a hero while leaving out the mistakes or controversial decisions he made. For example, when he was in charge, there were big problems in places like India, but he didn't talk much about them in his stories. Since Churchill was such a good writer and speaker, his version of history became very popular. Many people saw Britain as the main hero of the war because of how he told the story. But some historians think this wasn't fair because it didn't give enough credit to other countries like the Soviet Union or the United States, which also did a lot to win the war. It's like telling a story where one person seems like the main star, whilst others who helped just get small mentions. This has made people debate whether Churchill's stories were really fair, or if he was trying to protect his reputation for the future. Winston Churchill believed strongly in keeping the British Empire together, which included controlling many colonies around the world, such as India and parts of the Middle East. However, some of his decisions during this time have caused a lot of debate. For example, during the Bengal famine in 1943, millions of people in India died from starvation. Critics say that Churchill's government didn't do enough to send food to India, even though there was food available in other parts of the British Empire. This has led some people to think he cared more about the empire's resources than about the lives of people in the colonies.
Should there be a re-evaluation, not just of empire, but the figures that are associated with empire, particularly people like Winston Churchill?
Well, I certainly think Mr. Churchill needs very severe re-examination. He has as much blood on his hands as Hitler does, and particularly the decisions that he personally signed off on during the so-called Great Bengal Famine of 1943-44, when 4.3 million people died because of decisions that he took or endorsed.
Churchill also supported the idea that Britain should stay in control of its colonies, even when many people in these countries wanted independence. For example, in India, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi were fighting for freedom from British rule, but Churchill was strongly against it. Critics argue that this attitude showed a lack of respect for the people in the colonies and their desire to govern themselves. These decisions have led some to view Churchill not just as a war hero, but also as a symbol of the harshness of colonial rule. After World War II, the world was divided between two powerful groups, the Western countries, led by the United States and Britain, and the Eastern countries, led by the Soviet Union. Winston Churchill gave a famous speech in 1946 called the Iron Curtain Speech, where he described how Europe was being split into two parts, one side under Western democracies and the other under Soviet control.
In just a moment, you will hear Mr. Churchill. Mr. Churchill is still standing at the speaker's stand. He has shooed all the photographers away and he's just now ready to start.
President McClure, ladies and gentlemen, and last, but certainly not least, President of the United States of America.
He warned about the dangers of the Soviet Union spreading its influence, which made people in the West more suspicious of the Soviets. Some people believe that Churchill's speech wasn't just a warning, but an attempt to make the Soviet Union seem like a bigger enemy than it really was at the time. They think this speech helped start the Cold War, a long period of tension and rivalry between the East and West. According to these theories, Churchill wanted to create a strong alliance between Britain and the United States, making them the leaders of the world while opposing the Soviet Union. Whether Churchill meant to escalate tensions or not, his speech is often seen as a major moment that shaped the Cold War. Some people believe Winston Churchill might have been part of secretive groups like the Freemasons, which are organizations where members work together in private and often include powerful individuals. According to this theory, Churchill's involvement in such groups may have influenced his decisions as a leader. These groups are thought to have their own goals, and some people claim that Churchill made choices that helped the rich and powerful rather than ordinary people. This idea suggests that Churchill's plans for the world after World War II, like how countries were divided or who got the most power, were influenced by these secret connections. While most historians don't think there's real proof for this theory, it shows how some people like to imagine hidden reasons behind big events in history. It's an interesting story, but it's important to ask for solid evidence before believing in these kinds of ideas. There's a theory that Winston Churchill might have taken steps during the 1930s and early 1940s to provoke Nazi Germany into starting a war. According to this idea, Churchill wanted Britain to play a major role in the world and believed that fighting Germany would help make Britain a leader in the Allied effort. Some say he used strong speeches and bold actions to challenge Hitler, hoping this would push Germany into conflict. However, most historians don't believe this theory because there's little evidence to back it up. They argue that Churchill was focused on protecting Britain and standing up to Nazi aggression, not trying to start a war. Still, the idea continues to spread in certain groups, especially among those who look at history in unconventional ways. It's a reminder to always question big claims and look at the facts carefully. During his later years as a leader, Winston Churchill had several strokes, which are serious health problems that can affect a person's ability to think and move. One of these strokes happened while he was still the Prime Minister in the 1950s. However, most people didn't know about this at the time because his health issues were kept secret. The government and those around Churchill worked to hide how serious his condition was, so people would still see him as a strong and capable leader.
Many health problems. It contributed to this book. This book is filled with all of those health problems, and each chapter title describes a separate major health event in Winston Churchill's life. Chapter titles like chest pain during Christmas 1941 at the White House, pneumonia and atrial fibrillation in December 1943 in Carthage, and acute stroke in June 1953 in London. During all of those illnesses, including the stroke, Winston Churchill was serving as the now still widely regarded greatest British Prime Minister in history.
Some people believe this was done to avoid causing panic or uncertainty during a tense time in history, like the Cold War. If the public knew Churchill was unwell, it might have made them worry about the country's leadership or caused political problems. Even though keeping his health a secret helped maintain stability, it also raises questions about whether it was right to hide such important information from the public. Winston Churchill is remembered as a major historical figure, but not everyone agrees on how to view his actions. Some people believe in theories that suggest he made secret deals, took controversial actions, or had hidden motives. However, many of these ideas don't have much evidence to back them up. They reflect how complicated his legacy is, as Churchill was both a strong leader and someone whose decisions, like his support for British imperialism, remain doubtful. What we do know from history is that Churchill made big, sometimes difficult choices during his time as a leader, especially during World War II. While some of his decisions are celebrated, others, like his colonial policies, are criticized. The theories about secret agreements or hidden motives are mostly guesses, but they show how people continue to debate his role in shaping the modern world. This makes Churchill a figure who is both admired and questioned, depending on who you ask.